Hi, my name is Jerry Helms. I am a graduate student in the North Carolina State University School of Education, attending a class on assessment and evaluation in adult and higher education. This presentation is an assignment to reflect on a previous evaluation experience where I was a program participant, program designer, or program provider. In addition to briefly describing the program being evaluated, the assignment also included the assignment to answer the following questions. What evaluation strategies were employed? Was the program evaluated effectively? And what could have been done differently to effectively evaluate the program? I want to first start with a definition of evaluation from the textbook. Evaluation is judging the merit or worth of something. The identification, clarification, and application of defensible criteria to determine an evaluation object's value, worth, or merit in relationship to those criteria. The business problem that I'm going to be describing, I feel compelled to not disclose the details of the company name or individual names or individual results of the evaluation study itself, so they have been omitted from this presentation. When I was hired to come to work for this particular company, the company president told me that he felt as though no one seemed to be accountable for getting anything done. They would sit around in meetings and talk about things, and people would say they would do it, and then nothing would happen. So his assignment was, I want you to help implement accountability within the organization. A pretty broad and wide statement. Some of the symptoms of the problems as I started examining the situation, when I looked at projects, they never got finished, they were late, more money was expended than anticipated, and then clients or customers simply did not buy the product that was designed or implemented for the customer. There was a lot of multitasking going around multitasking, people working on too many projects, interrupting the workflow, and never getting anything done. There was no clear vision of relative priorities within the organization. So people were constantly asking themselves on an hourly or daily basis, what's the most important thing that I should be working on now? Quite often there were too few resources to complete projects. And then in general, senior, middle-level staff had poor project management and execution skills. So what to do? I pulled together a team of participants from within the organization, including the president of the company, where I was the managing stakeholder, to try to figure out what we were going to do to put our arms around this particular issue. We had senior and mid-level managers that were actively participating stakeholders, our customers, our external stakeholders, and then our employees were internal stakeholders within this particular problem set. First, let's talk about creating a common vision. Yogi Berra is quoted, "If you don't know where you are going, you'll end up somewhere else." And clearly, this was a number one problem within the organization. There was not a clear vision as to what the goals and objectives were of the organization and where we should be headed. So the visioning process, we first started with a technique called a SWOT, Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats Assessment. Strengths, what are our core competencies? Strengths and weaknesses are internal to the organization. Weaknesses, what are our disadvantages relative to others? Opportunities and threats are external to the operation. What are some external elements of our competitive marketplace that can be exploited? And then finally, what are the threats? What are the external environmental elements that could cause trouble down the road? So we pulled together a team of the senior level, mid-senior level stakeholders should start going through the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats assessment using a structured tool. It's described at various points in the literature. A specific reference I use for this class is Bateman and Snell. It's a very collaborative process. It occurred over multiple weeks, probably 6 to 8 weeks, to meet and talk and give assignments to team members. And we encouraged creativity, brainstorming, and thinking outside of the box. We had a general business goal. We wanted to make money, but we felt the need to clarify and crystallize it in a collaborative process so that everyone would buy off on the goal. A key element of this process was assigning an individual on the team to always speak from the voice of the customer. We always wanted to be reminded, is this what we're talking about something of interest to the customer? And since we didn't have direct access to our customers on a regular basis, we had an internal advocate for that role. One element of the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats assessment is creating what's called the growth share matrix, also known as developed by the Boston Consulting Group. One of the interesting things about this matrix is that it translates qualitative data into quantitative visual representation. So each of the quadrants on this matrix represent either high market growth or strong competitive position and where our products moved within this matrix. When we developed our matrix, we found we were spending too much time on our dogs and perhaps too much time on our cash cows. There's not much you can do to change your competitive position with a cash cow or your market growth with a cash cow. This is something that you milk. The growth share matrix is not a substitute for management judgment, creativity, insight, or leadership, and it assisted greatly in focusing on more valuable future efforts, getting a consensus opinion about where we should be spending our time. The strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats assessment led us, after we had a firm understanding of those elements, to developing a portfolio of potential future projects. And we found very quickly that there were very many more potential projects than people to do them at the same time. So the goal of this project portfolio tool was to prioritize projects against our business needs. To cut down on multitasking, we were not going to allow too many simultaneous projects. And we used the list for brainstorming potential new projects and then put them into a separate section so that they will not be forgotten. So here we have a ranked spreadsheet. Our dimensions of requirements were product diversification, throughput improvement, which is also profit improvement, customer focus, and quality, as you can see at the top of the chart. And then down through the chart we listed our completed, canceled, or prioritized projects, unprioritized projects, and we use this to come up with a total weighted score on the right hand side of the spreadsheet to help us understand which projects are meeting our business needs. It's a form of a logic model. Both of these are forms of logic models. In business, there are a lot of tools that have been developed and implemented to help businesses make decisions and make judgments. And they don't think about it from a purely perspective evaluation perspective. They look at a particular business problem and what makes sense to help improve the performance of that problem. As a result of the project portfolio, we decided that we needed to have a focus on continuous improvement. So the SWOT assessment, the project portfolio, the Boston Consulting Group matrix all helped us to come to a consensus opinion that we needed to be a company always working on improvement. We challenged the status quo. We recognized that change was inevitable, change was necessary for improvement. We created a strong common vision. And then finally, we, over the long term, decided to work on improving our organizational learning with our project management skills, with our writing skills, with our visioning skills, So we had an ongoing organizational learning culture that occurred after this particular project. Some of the lessons that were done well, that we had good participation from multiple areas of the company. It helped to build teams. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the politics and the team building on a future slide. We had less multitasking, and that led to improved project performance. We actually were able to get more done in a shorter period of time by working on fewer projects simultaneously. We participated in sessions to evaluate our performance on an ongoing basis and consistently refocus our vision on future projects. And we also learned the importance of focusing on the voice of the customer. What is it that the customer really wants as opposed to what we want internally? What could have been done better? We had a few internal skeptics of the process. Later on down, a couple years later, we brought in an external evaluator for additional credibility. And again, this goes back to the politics, and I'll talk more about this on a subsequent slide. Politics were something that were a surprise, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Politics and evaluation is well documented in the textbook as well as other resources. Evaluation is a rational enterprise that takes place in a political context. Rational enterprise and political context are sort of an oxymoron, but I think that we all recognize that politics are important in any evaluation or project. The existing environment, I was a newcomer to the organization, so the existing environment had a very high level of mistrust between stakeholders, between each other, which was encouraged by prior senior management. After this process was over, several people say, you know, we really appreciate this team building and the respect for each other's values. In the previous administration, my group was told by so-and-so not to go talk to somebody else's group, not even to talk to them, which I found quite surprising, and I did not know before we started the visioning and evaluation process. As we went through the process, stakeholders were not always supportive. In a few cases, there was hidden hostility. They may have had an idea for a new initiative several years ago, and no one ever acted on it. So here we are going through a new evaluation process, and their ideas sort of get scrubbed out and attributed to no one in particular, even though came up with the idea several years ago. There were some issues about legitimacy of need for change, or was change really going to do any good? Was anything going to really happen as a result of going through the process? People questioned the goals and the strategies. So a big personal lesson learned for me is that you have to work a little bit harder on understanding the politics of a situation before you jump into an evaluation. And as you proceed through the evaluation, you may find other political factors and need to make dynamic adjustments in the evaluation itself. We decided as a result of this process to focus on continuous improvement, which I mentioned earlier. So here are some of the core objectives of continuous improvement: increasing sales, profitability, lots of improvement and reductions that you can read yourself on this particular slide. We started implementing a lot of what we had learned in our visioning and our continuous improvement, and we started seeing great results. From the red line to the right, things started going up dramatically with regards to sales. EBITDA is earnings before income tax and dividends adjustments, which is profit. Bottom line profit was going up. Gross margin, percentage of sales, was going up consistently. Operating expenses were coming down dramatically. So we used the standard financial measurements that most organizations use to really gauge whether or not we were having an impact with what we were doing, and it looked pretty rosy. However, when you look at the standard business measurements, it does not really show cause and effect. Continuous improvement were ongoing with the prior charts, but you started seeing sales declines in later years. Those were due to external forces, fewer customers buying our products, customers switching to competitors. We still were doing continuous improvement and still improving the expense ratios, but we weren't improving sales anymore. So one of the key lessons learned from this effort was measurement. You really have to focus on cause and effect relationships to determine the worth of any particular program. Logic models is one of the evaluation strategies that I feel as though is very well memorialized in a lot of business tools, and we'll have a slide on business tools in a moment, where you identify inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, and it may be some kind of a visual diagram. For sake of brevity of this program, I haven't included all of the logic model examples that we used in our different evaluation strategies, but I think even this particular evaluation has some elements adapted from logic models. We improved participation. Now, participation in our environment was semi-democratic. We encouraged everybody to speak their piece, to say what was on their mind, but if there became contention about which direction we needed to go in, the senior level manager had to make a decision and move forward. It was a very strongly decision-oriented evaluation. We'll see some of the elements of decision-oriented on a slide in just a moment. One of the big things that we did was to create an ongoing community of practice, where we share things as project managers, even the mid-level. We share things as senior managers on a weekly basis, and created an ongoing community of practice to help our organizational learning. So when we look at decision-oriented versus participant-oriented evaluation strategies, these are a few bullet points that jumped out from the textbook. On a decision-oriented basis, this particular evaluation helped to provide useful information to aid in making decisions. It helped us to develop an organizational management system that persisted over time. It provided a tool for planning of our programs. It did improve accountability, and it was a systematic approach to evaluation. We also had participant-oriented strategies included. We involved many more stakeholders than we did before. We empowered specific stakeholders. We assigned people to be project leaders for specific projects. We assigned people to be the voice of the customer. We created an environment where people felt free to speak their mind. There was a lot of formative evaluation and organizational learning. How can we improve our processes? With the ultimate goal of improving our financial results. We did have an improvement in democracy, which goes hand in hand with team building. But again, in a few cases, a senior manager had to step in and make a decision on behalf of the group as opposed to letting them flounder. After this initial evaluation, we had ongoing evaluation efforts. Initially, we only included internal stakeholders as evaluators. Down the road, we involved external evaluations for the following reasons. We needed training in an unfamiliar discipline. We needed some impartiality in the evaluation process. But most importantly, we needed someone to come into the organization and ask us questions that had not been thought of before. We had sort of reached our limit internally of being able to see outside our own box. And by bringing in external evaluators, that helped us to see things that we had not seen before. There are many, many process improvement tools in management literature to help organizations find root cause, to take information, to distill it to become meaningful. This is a list of perhaps 20 or 30 process improvement tools. Many of these tools are attributed to Lean Six Sigma philosophies. And it's just an illustration that the business world has a lot of techniques out there to assist in measurement and evaluation. In summary, there are an extensive set of tools, as I illustrated on the previous slide, to assist in goal setting, measurement, and improving operations. This particular evaluation was very comprehensive, and it provided the basis for organizational learning, continuous improvement, and we did evaluations on a regular routine basis. We revised our goals, our vision statement annually. So we had good short-term results. Long-term, the results were more strongly related to the impact of the global economic downturn. If your customers quit buying things, it really doesn't matter how effective you are internally. The only way that you can cut the losses are to cut some staff. Thank you very much for taking time to view this presentation. Here's a list of references that was used for this presentation. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or comments.